And what they've been telling us, of course, is that the humanitarian situation there is absolutely dire. There's no food, no water, no electricity, barely any connectivity. So they're quite cut off from the world.
But recently, ICRC sent the convoy of buses and private cars, so more than 1,000 people were able to move to another region. So how was the situation around the Maриуполь like when the ICRC got there?
We spoke with people who have fled Maриуполь and who were, of course, on our convoy, but we also saw them in neighboring villages where they were sleeping. And so they were really talking to us about the situation there. As I've said, there's no water, no electricity, no food. Shortages you always have in cities when there's hostilities. Medication, what for usual people is easy to get, water, food, etc., becomes very complicated when there's hostilities. And of course, when there's not humanitarian assistance getting in. People are deeply traumatized. A woman approached us and said how once she left a bit her home where she was sheltering because of the hostilities, she had dead bodies on her doorstep. Another woman was crying all the time. Her husband had a high fever. You can really see that people are absolutely distressed, so exhausted physically, psychologically. Their faces also are a bit gray, white, pale because of the time that they have been spending in shelter. But what we also saw is that there is really the villages around are supporting them. So there's really host communities who give them shelter, who give them water, who give them food. We also want to be able, of course, to support those communities in terms of food, water, and also lack of medication. A lot of people have been saying that there's lack of medication, but it's also all the basics which start to be missing. It's going to be things as simple as aspirin, as antibiotics, and we really hope to be able to get that kind of assistance in. We were also able to proceed then on our cross-line operation without, unfortunately, accessing directly Maриуполь. We were 20 kilometers away. We were on the other side of the front line for 5 days. And fortunately, in the end, so it was on Tuesday, we were able to bring, in the end, it was about 800, 1,000 civilians from Berdyansk to Zaporizhzhia to safety. We arrived at 10 a.m. With our cars and 7 buses, and hundreds of people were already waiting for us. Then private cars joined us. What we saw on the other side is that cars travel labeling that they're civilians, basically. It's written Ljudi, Dzieci, that means people, children. And these cars, there were 7 of them at the beginning when we left Berdyansk. And at the end, when we arrived in Zaporizhzhia, there were 100 cars. And really people were joining us along the way because they saw the Red Cross. They saw this emblem of protection and just, when they could, joined the convoy. So as the convoy was getting bigger and bigger, unfortunately, we weren't able to cross front line in one day. So we had, unfortunately, to overnight. And that was really rough for everybody. I mean, for us, knowing what all these people have gone through, to know that once again, they're going to have to spend a night in the cold. And so we arrived the next day, and we could really see how much people were relieved. As I said, even when they were boarding the buses, many people were crying because they knew that they were soon going to be in safety.
Horrifying situations were witnessed in Bucha, Berdyansk, and Hostomel, and also other regions where the Russian army was withdrawn. So what was the situation like in those areas?
So what I can say is we had teams who recently were able to go to Bucha and to Irpin, and what they saw was really profoundly disturbing. Huge amount of destruction. Civilians left there absolutely traumatized. And what we're witnessing more and more is in these areas where hostilities have been severe, those who stay behind are the most vulnerable often. It's the elderly who cannot actually flee and who need, of course, huge humanitarian assistance. What colleagues also witnessed, and which is a danger for the civilians remaining there, is what we call unexploded ordnance, which can, of course, take a toll on the civilians if they walk on these. And so the colleagues were able to mark these areas so that civilians aren't in danger.
So what extra humanitarian aid is needed to evacuate people and also support the people who is left there?
So the current setup we have is there are teams who are based close to front line, but not close enough in order to have warehouses, to have trucks arriving with medical supplies, food, water, tarpaulin, that is to repair also, for instance, houses and things like this, which are constantly coming. And the areas where we're based, so in Kyiv, in Poltava, here in Dnipro, allows us then to do operations in areas close to front line and deliver much needed assistance. It's hard for trucks to be able to get into Irpin because of the state of the road. The road also, we have to watch out for mines, for unexploded ordnance and things like this. So things which can seem very easy in the minds of people. Oh, you just send a truck and then it gets there. No, it's going to be, of course, more complicated than that because you need the security guarantees in order to go in. You need also the road to be safe. So that's why when we get into these cities where there's been harsh hostilities, we always have colleagues who are have the experience of what we call unexploded ordnance. So they're going to see if the road is safe. So what happens is usually you go a first time with, of course, some supplies which you know are needed. You assess the road to know if you can, for instance, bring in some trucks with much more supplies if the road is safe. We will continue, of course, asking for it. We know that people are in terrible need, and we're doing it's all the efforts possible in order to be able to assist and protect the people. So we came back, of course, from across front line. We want to be able, of course, to do this again. So we're ready, of course, again to do a cross-line operation and be able to both facilitate safe passage and also bring humanitarian in there.